We are undoing the bolts for the transmission cross member. I've got the transmission supported with the jack. I took out all the bolts on the bell housing. So now we're just going to, I can't really get the exhaust pipes out of the way. I probably could, but I already broke one bolt off, so I'm not gonna mess with them. I'm gonna try to do it without it. Here is the throttle valve cable for the transmission. How to remove it, earlier I think I told you guys that you have to disconnect it from up top in order to be able to get it out from the bottom. So first, disconnect it from the top, remove your air cleaner, it's just a little wing nut, and then you've got this entire deal. Here's your throttle bracket. You're looking at right here. This is that cable that we're talking about. This would normally be attached right down here on your throttle. And then there's a little plastic cap on the back, which is right over here. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it goes right through this hole. Get a shot of this hole. See where my finger is? There's a plastic, there's two tabs. You need to squeeze the top of it and then you can push it right back through. And then you just pull it back through to set it back up. You don't need to adjust it or anything. That's just giving you enough slack and taking the tension off of it so that you can get it out from the transmission underneath. I think that was the only tricky part that I didn't show, but it's pretty straightforward. I'll show you guys when I hook it back up. All right, now we're gonna go fill the torque converter so that we can install it and put the transmission back in. I'm gonna pre-fill the torque converter right now. Do you need to? I don't know. Can it hurt? No. So I'm using Dex 3. It's just a Valvoline full synthetic compatible transmission fluid. I don't use ATF. This Dex 3 should be in this transmission. So we're gonna go with this. I'm just gonna dump some in so we don't start it dry. I don't need a whole lot, but we'll get as much as we can in there. And then it'll help if you spin it around. That'll help you get more in there, but I don't want to dump a ton in because I don't want it to dump out all over me when I'm lifting this thing up. Maybe a quart, half a quart or so. So we got the transmission back in. The jack is here supporting the back end. It's kind of holding itself up right now though. It's 6 14mm bolts all around. One is got a long stud on the end of it. Our torque converter is still not bolted in right now. It's floating. I just hooked up the linkage for the column shift for the transmission right now. I just pulled the cotter pin. Careful, there's a spring and a rubber bushing that goes on the frame bracket side. Let's see, that's the cotter pin. All I did to take this off, put it back on, you pull the cotter pin out and then this whole thing slides up and out, and then this spring will kind of be free hanging along with the rubber boot over there, so be careful not to lose that. We have the dipstick. It is kind of shoved back in over here. I'll push it in a little bit further. And then we have the TV cable. We're gonna hook that up probably right now. And then we'll put our transmission lines back in. Probably put the starter in. Then at some point I'll bolt up the torque converter. So let me show you guys how that throttle valve cable works right now. And keep in mind, it's still disconnected up top. That's important. You will not be able to do any of this if it's not disconnected up top. This part kind of confused me, but this metal hook will stay with the transmission. This comes apart and it just goes right through that eyelet. And then now it's bolt. Oh. Okay. So we're gonna hold it like that. I'm gonna have the cameraman put some pressure back here so it doesn't fall apart. And then I'm gonna go link it back up at the top. And it's just a 10mm bolt that holds the TV cable in. We we are putting that back in right now. Don't have to tighten it down too much, just so it doesn't leak. Alright, next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna bolt in the torque converter. That way I don't have the lines in my way when I'm trying to do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the torque converter in right now, bolt it down. Alright. I'm putting the anti-seize on the bolts. If they were to back them, I was thinking about Loctiting them down, but I realized, I don't know, it's probably more of a pain than I want to deal with. If I just, I can just pull this dust cover off 6 bolts and then, you know, put the bolts back in or whatever I need to do. It's a lot easier than having to deal with, bolts that are stuck in there. And that's what I'm trying to avoid right now. So they are 15 millimeter. There's only 3 of them. And it's pretty straightforward. I think we've got our pump seated pretty far in there. So I have a feeling it's gonna pull the pump forward quite a bit. Yeah. It is pulling the pump out a little bit from the transmission. About 1/4 of an inch. It was spaced away, so transfer case is in. Third member is in. Support. All right. The transmission's still in. Torque converter is still hanging out. It's pretty much ready to go here. We have to connect one more transmission line. Okay, let me see what else we have here. Pretty much everything's hooked up. So right now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and add 4 quarts of transmission fluid, Dextron 3, straight to the dipstick. I already pre-filled the torque converter a little bit. And then we're gonna fire it up and we'll check for leaks first, and then we'll immediately start dumping in. As soon as we fire it up, we'll start dumping in as much transmission fluid as we can. Probably get another 6 quarts on top of that 4 that we initially put in there. And we'll dump that in as soon as possible. And just check through everything, make sure we can cycle through all the gears. And let's see if we got any leaks. Well, we just took it for a drive. We had the fluid level adjusted. The torque converter seems to be working. It moves forward and reverse. Idle's fine, starts up fine. Don't hear any weird whining noises. So we're gonna go ahead and throw the dust cover back on. She's rolling under her own power. Torque converter's in. Did a test drive last night, so we're gonna go ahead and take it out again today. Everything's working right now.